How to plaster a wall. Although it can look intimidating, with some practice and an organised methodical approach, plastering a wall is a realistic goal for any DIY enthusiast. You'll find a full list of tools and materials you'll need at the end of this video. Thorough preparation is key to achieving a professional finish, so see our online guide or leaflet for advice on planning and preparation and aftercare. Start by covering the floor and any nearby furniture with protective sheets. Make sure you've removed all loose plaster, paper, grease and dust from the surface you plan to plaster. New plasterboard does not require priming, but if you're working with an existing wall, treat the surface with a primer that is a mix of PVA glue and water. To ensure a smooth, even finish, apply plaster tape to cover all the joints between plasterboard sheets. Once the tape is in place, use a snap-off knife to trim a neat edge. To prepare the plaster mix, start by half-filling a bucket with clean tap water. When preparing plaster, you should always add the water first as it keeps the mixture from becoming lumpy. Be sure to check and follow the manufacturer's instructions on the packaging. Slowly add the plaster powder to the water. It's best to make more plaster mixture as and when you need it, instead of making a large quantity at the start. You can either mix the plaster manually or with a power stirrer, but be sure to always follow the manufacturer's instructions. If you do opt for a power stirrer, then make sure it's fully submerged in the mixture before switching on and use it at a low speed in order to not overwork the mixture. Throughout the mixing process, use a bucket trowel to incorporate any dry plaster from around the edge of the bucket. When you've finished mixing, clean tools thoroughly before the plaster has time to set. If you're going to be plastering a large area, then it's best to pour your plaster onto a spot board. The mix should be thick enough that it's easy to spread, but doesn't run. Using a plastering trowel, cut away a section of mixed plaster and transfer it to the plastering hawk. It's best to only use a small amount to start with if you're not used to handling it. If you're working with plasterboard, start by adding a thin coat over any joints. Then, push a section of the plaster up and onto the wall surface using a plastering trowel and spread from left to right. It's best to press firmly and distribute the plaster as evenly as possible. Use both vertical and horizontal movements when spreading the plaster. If you need to plaster around a light socket, disconnect your electricity supply before doing so. To avoid getting plaster within, it's also best to cover the socket whilst working. Try to work quickly and build up a rhythm in order to cover the surface before the plaster begins to set. Then, go back over the whole surface with a thin second coat and smooth to an even thickness. Following the manufacturer's instructions, leave the plaster to dry until the surface is still slightly damp but firm enough that it doesn't move when touched. Then, go over the whole surface with a clean trowel blade, dampening the surface with a spray gun as you go. This will smooth the plaster and help to fill any small indentations. To achieve a smooth and level finish, hold the blade so that only one edge is on the plaster. Then, use a small damp brush to smooth corners and edges. Following the manufacturer's instructions, allow to dry further before repeating this smoothing process for the final time. The plaster should be harder than before, but still slightly damp at this stage. Leave to dry completely before painting or applying wallpaper. This may take a couple of weeks, so you'll need to check the manufacturer's instructions. Here is a list of tools you'll need to plaster a wall. And here are the materials you'll use. And this is the recommended safety equipment needed.